So my name is Jacqui Patten. I am the Customer Success Manager for Western Australia, as Jodie introduced me earlier. Our first presenter in this session is Anita Hamilton. Anita is an Associate Professor in the Master of Occupational Therapy programme at UTAS, University of Tasmania. She has been integrating ePortfolios into her teaching for over a decade and enjoys seeing how they help students connect their learning and professional growth. Anita is currently collaborating with colleagues to create authentic programmatic approaches to assessment and to support students in developing career-ready portfolios. So without further ado, I shall hand over to Anita.
Oh, thank you, Jacqui. I feel like I know you, Jacqui, because I've watched your videos. So it's really lovely to hear your voice live in action. So thank you, everybody, for being here today. And I just want to say thank you again to PebblePad for always just being such a fantastic resource and community. And I'm grateful that when I moved from my previous University of the Sunshine Coast to University of Tasmania, PebblePad was my one connection point of continuity. So I'm going to tell you a bit about our story of integrating an ePortfolio into our new Master of Occupational Therapy program, and just trying to tell you a bit about how we've aligned it with interprofessional programs and used the ePortfolio to support authentic learning and identity formation. Now, it's very much an early journey, part of the journey, so they're probably aspirational comments more than things that I can verify right now. So we're actually the third of 3 degrees coming on in the last maybe I think it's 4 years. So firstly, physiotherapy and speech pathology opened, and they're now working with their 4th cohort, and occupational therapy commenced this year. And one of the things that we had to do, had we come on together, we would have all been developing this together, but because we were the last group, we needed to fit into the ecosystem that had already been developed with physiotherapy and speech pathology. And across the 4 semesters of the master's programs, we have 3 interprofessional units that we share and co-teach. So the ePortfolio is integral to those, and so therefore we had these touch points that we needed to be on the same song sheet as those 2 other disciplines, rather than just trailblazing our own way. And those who've worked with me previously know that I love to trailblaze my own way. So this was a really good lesson for me about learning about what was working and augmenting that, and finding out what was working and doing a better job, but also having our own agenda being okay to include. So what we did was I met a lot with the lead of the program, Ange Bernd, and she's actually an incredible visionary. And so she had already designed the curriculum. In theory, it hadn't been fully written, but it had all been designed. And we needed to align with the other 2 programs, but we also have our own frameworks and other expectations that we have to meet. So we spoke a lot about where portfolio would fit, and I'm a bit of a make it really tight so the students don't feel uncomfortable at all, and Ange is much more about you're creating your own adventure or your own journey, being unique, being iterative. And that was really interesting. So we had this sort of dance for a while about where we would both sit with ePortfolio. And I'll say it again, I had to learn to be flexible, which is a good thing for me. So the first step really was to define ePortfolio, and we decided to do that as a team. And then we went to map and align with the frameworks that informed the curriculum, built some components, started training, and then launching. So I'm just going to go through a couple of those steps. I think it's really interesting going back and starting this whole process again in a new program. So to define ePortfolio, I decided that I wanted to brainstorm this with the team. So we spent some time actually in New Norfolk and a morning together where we talked about the product itself and the process. And everybody wrote on cards what they were, and then we listened to each other's explanations. So when we talked about product, we talked that right through. When we talked about process, we talked that right through. I took all those cards home and reanalyzed them, and we could see, I could see that they had really distilled it quite well. And so we came to a shared definition, and it was a structured and living repository for gathering and curating artifacts that evidence learning, innovation, transformation, and identity development in readiness for practice. And we came to that over a few additional meetings, so it wasn't just me taking it away and giving it back. It was me bringing it back to them and then iterating again with them. And I think that was a really important step in the process, because had I said, this is what portfolio is and this is what we're going to do, you can all imagine how that would have gone. So the next thing that we needed to do after that was to really think about mapping and aligning the frameworks that inform the curriculum and thinking about where they needed to to show up in the ePortfolio. So I had to look at all of these, because Ange had actually spent a lot of time using all of these different frameworks to build the scaffolding for the curriculum. And what we found was really that we could distill the frameworks, all those 6 frameworks, into 4 themes, and that these would inform the overall scaffolding for the ePortfolio. And what supported this was that the Occupational Therapy Professional Competency Standards and the University of Tasmania Graduate Qualities aligned with these 4. So when we had things like the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander capability framework, that sits under cultural capability. And then professional knowledge and skills, our professional standards can fit in there. And interdisciplinarity, our units can sit in there, as well as practice education, which can sit in a lot of them. And then this other area of sustainability. So sustainability, it's a big point of pride for University of Tasmania, but also in occupational therapy, the World Federation of Occupational Therapists has its own set of standards for education and practice. So it's nice to have that big scaffolding. And then, of course, there's this iterative process that now has to happen again for us to know like what we're going to do in each of these spaces. We also didn't want to overwhelm our students with too much. So we just started by explaining the purpose, the process, product, etc. And I'll just move ahead to a couple of things that I think helped do that. It was probably they helped me more than anything, but I was walking down my street and I saw this beautiful arch that had been built by the person who lives at this property. And I thought, that's the portfolio. This frames the portfolio. So it's about these walls being the students' prior knowledge and skills and experiences, that they're the foundation for learning. They've got a degree, they've lived, they've worked, they've got so much experience, and then they're coming in to become an occupational therapist. So we're now looking at this, we're now providing this additional education and opportunity for learning. So we talk about it as this building up, and then each unit that they take contributes to the learning and transformation. And then hopefully we'll be celebrating their progress along the way. It's not just at the end. But the capstone project, which is what sits right in the centre there, is the final step in completing that gateway to graduation. So our lovely videographer at work, Bruce, he's just amazing. He just created this for me so that I could represent it more easily. But basically, we start with stage 1, 2, 3, and 4, and the capstone are together in the final semester. And this is really helpful for students to see that you don't have to know it all at once. It's not going to be built in a day. And hopefully the message also is that it's going to continue building after you graduate. So the first place that we did start was the My Practice Standards workbook, which aligned with, of course, with the professional standards. And so the students immediately get that identity connection. And I think that's always a good place to start too, because had we told them about all of the other frameworks that were informing the curriculum, because within these practice standards, it's all about interprofessionality, it's about indigenisation, decolonisation, cultural awareness, communication. There's so much in there, and those other frameworks were informing this and enriching this, but that's too much information for students when they first start. So just by starting here, they could see that we were going to be achieving their goal, which is to become an occupational therapist. And we'll gradually, as we build, help them build their knowledge and skills and awareness of what the journey entails, we'll be able to tell them how the other frameworks have informed a more in-depth curriculum, and how that can be represented in a portfolio that can be, well, obviously represented in any way they choose by the end in their capstone. I developed a little bit of a timeline for and activities for students, and I also did one with the team, just so that they could see that we would step this out, that it wouldn't all come at once, and things like introducing what the career portfolio is, and that was the term that we inherited when we started our portfolio. Explaining, having just the purpose of our portfolio, what the professional standards workbook looked like, how they could use it, offering training along the way and opt-in, and at a time that we knew that they were mostly available, which was good because otherwise they wouldn't come. And then also gradually introducing other components along the way. So one of the ones that we introduced during the semester, which was, thank you, Carol, for your wonderful suggestion, was the feedback reflection workbook. And that's going to be a work in progress over the coming semesters, because I don't think that's something that's done especially well, is reflection on feedback and creating learning plans, because I think a lot of students think that the learning plan's already set for them because it's called a curriculum, but everybody started at a different place, so everyone has a different learning journey. So it's going to be interesting to work with that mindset. At the moment, we're in week 13, so tomorrow in my final class, I will be saying, we have online tutorials on Fridays. I'll be saying, here are the learning outcomes. This is how they relate, and here's how all of your professional standards, these are the behaviours that I know you can demonstrate at foundation or even developing level from this unit. Please come back and add your evidence. So it's very early days for us, and that's probably, we're very fortunate to be in this position, because I think the key things that we're looking at right now are strengthening feedback processes from between staff with each other, the whole team, also students, because we've got very different students. We've got our black and white students, where's the evidence, and through to, I really want to feel the whole thing. So we've got this really broad range of students, and they have different needs and wants in this space. We need it to remain dynamic and iterative, which will be, that's my test, right? And which is good, but I've got a really fantastic creative team supporting me to learn to be more flexible. And I think that what we're showing here is that this is a real journey. By creating a portfolio, we're spelling out the journey for the students and also with the students. And it actually is helping us to, I think, slow down a little bit with some of our work. I have got the stages outlined on the last two slides. I didn't know whether you'd be interested to see these, and I'd be really happy to share these further. But at the introductory level, for example, demonstrate basic knowledge of occupational therapy concepts and terminology, observes and describes professional behaviours and therapeutic processes, begins to recognise the role of occupational therapists in various contexts, and identifies own learning need with support. So that's the sort of feel we have for that, and we've defined up in all 4 stages. So I'll finish there and time for questions, but I noticed that there was a bit of chat in the and I was trying really hard not to look at it. So I'll stop talking so we can take questions.
Okay, all good, Anita. Just before we go into what was in the chat, just a few things from me.
Yes.
Is it really resonated about that kind of balancing act between the highly structured kind of workbook approach and wanting to scaffold almost everything the students do to then the highly creative ePortfolio, just let them have a go at it. And there are definite sort of pros and cons on both of them. With the interprofessional capability frameworks, I'm assuming you're already over this, but there are workshops run by Anzapi on that very thing. So I've attended 2 this year. Yeah, so I mean, so they're building on that whole concept of can we have an interprofessional framework? And then I don't know whether you did this by design or by chance, but the fact that clever alignment of the OT framework with the UTAS graduate attributes sort of also worked really well because they're doing kind of 2 things at once. I also loved that it was mentioned in the chat about Desley said about the ePortfolio assists with developing professional identity. Obviously, you do want them to use it after graduation, which is where the alumni accounts come in. And I thought it was brilliant in your kind of week 1, week 2 flow chart is that you had PebblePad training kind of almost at every stage, so at different times and different places. So Clarissa pointed out, and I assume you work with Clarissa, she said,
I do.
She said, Anita is so right. It was an excellent team surface the conception of the portfolio and to actually decide what the portfolio was, which Alison also mentioned, because it is sometimes a step that people miss. Like, what does portfolio actually mean to us in our context? And then there was a question off Jenny, and I don't know by looking at it, but do you use mappable workbooks for the professional standards?
Yeah, this is it here. This is it here. Yeah. So thanks for that question. So professionalism, and then you can they can map against each of the behaviors. Oh, I have to re-log in. I've been out too long. Sorry, guys. But that was it there. That was interesting.
So they're actually using the capability blocks underneath on those pages.
Correct. That's right. Yes.
And I'm guessing that was Carol's idea, or maybe your own.
Oh, well, Carol was amazing with her idea. And like I think, ultimately there are a lot of ideas that I think we're going to work with and gradually adopt and build, but I think we're trying really hard not to do everything at once, because we haven't actually written our whole curriculum yet, which is good too.
Well, there is that, the old curriculum thing.
So it's really helpful because we can take little steps with the curriculum development at the same time as the portfolio development. And so we're always, my experience before, so you're retrofitting portfolio into an existing curriculum. And I suppose I was thinking about this morning, if I was to go somewhere where there's an existing curriculum, I would probably suggest bringing it through the degree, like portfolio practice through the degree from the bottom up rather than backwards, because if you say, oh yes, it's a capstone, I think a lot of people don't take ownership of it in other sections of the degree because it's just that final assignment, not for me to worry about. But if the students haven't had a chance to build their knowledge of what portfolio is and how to gather evidence and demonstrate the journey, then the capstone's very hard to complete. So, yeah.
No,
Anyway.
absolutely. And I think we find we've done this for a few years now, so we kind of know what
Mm,
works and what doesn't. And that sort of continuation, introduce PebblePad early, but like something really low stakes. So one of the
yeah.
things that we
Yeah.
kind of promote is like a letter to your future self, but then that can then
Yes.
become evidence of
Yeah.
professionalism and that sort of thing. So yeah, because if you just start at the end and then you've got to try and think back of everything you've done, obviously that would be quite daunting for most people. So yeah, I think it's start early,
Mm,
start small, and like you say, let it grow
yeah.
organically. And you're in a unique
Yeah.
position because you're growing the curriculum as you go. So I think you've done a
Yeah.
great, Anita, and I really enjoyed that presentation.